up to Gene Osborne on the show that he is
He's
just
getting
killing
it.
it with thumbnails.
He's getting it.
He's knee deep in thumbnail perfection right now.
It's true.
Like anyone that's listening to this show, watch the show for the Jean Bajlan thumbnail, because the audio only thumbnails I do, they pale in comparison to what Bajlan is doing right now.
You gotta use
He is
his.
posing. Well, it's too much to do and resizing. It's
Oh,
too
you
much.
stop it. Oh, you stop it.
Oh, you men. Host Jason Miles, and welcome to our bi-monthly streams with good friends Matt and David over at Left Reckoning. Matt this week is on break and won't be joining us, but we have an informative show for you planned nonetheless. Also after the show, if you're a patron, we'll be going into the champagne room to take some calls on what you guys have to say about this primary season, your feelings on the wins and defeats, and where you think we go from here. Real quick, a couple of things before I bring in the fellas. If you haven't done it yet, please hit like, subscribe, and of course that notification bell so you're alerted whenever we go live. For those of you that are subscribers, thank you for your continued support. If you'd like to wear your support for the shows featured today, then let the people know with TIR merch. MT, can you pull up the merchandise for people to see? Can you show them the dope mouse pad with Pascal Robert's smiling face? The only time you're going to get a picture of Pascal Robert smiling. People think that he's mad during the show. It's just he refuses to smile on air for the people. He's like Black Dynamite. I am smiling. Did you show him the mouse pad? Did you show him the mug? Also with Pascal's smiling face. Go to work.
Here.
With a smiling black man and Cuba on your mug, and have people go, who the fuck are these people? Please do it. Be different. Think different. Who was that? Was it Apple? Think different. All right. With the midterm elections in the rear view and some races and mail-in ballots still being counted, who was the real winner in this election? Were the pundits and polls correct? Did Dems get slaughtered like many had been predicting? In SF thought to be the bastion of progressive politics, it looks as if centrism was the victor. Has the blight of open-air drug markets and public homelessness defeated the progressive energy that was so thick in the air amid countrywide protests to defund or even abolish police? Mm-hmm. Is the idea of the transformative district attorney now out of vogue with the voting populace? From an article in the SF Chronicle. Tuesday's election capped off an unprecedented year at the polls in San Francisco. 2 recalls and a special election to fill a vacant state assembly seat awarded Breed the power to appoint 6 officials who then ran for election for the first time to keep their seats. Breed's appointees who won or appeared likely to win Thursday included the district attorney, a community college board candidate, a city supervisor, and 2 school board candidates. A third appointed school board candidate held a close lead over another opponent. District Attorney Brooke Jenkins declared victory Wednesday, leaning into her strong lead, although 100,000 votes were still left to be counted. Breed also supported 8 ballot measures, opposed 6, with most seeming to go her way as of Thursday. It's looking good for the city, Breed said Wednesday while on a shopping trip in Chinatown to highlight local merchants. What people are saying in this victory is they want San Francisco to work. Early results reflect the growing power of YIMBYs and tech in the city and show moderate candidates are appealing to fed-up San Franciscans, with the mayor now facing another year in office because of a change in election timing that also passed Tuesday. She'll serve until January 2025. Can you believe that? January 2025? Voters will look for her to address open-air drug use and overdoses, bring down property crime, tackle the housing and homelessness crises, and ensure schools run well. But even with allies in key offices, the mayor faces practical hurdles to delivering results. Clearly, the mayor had a good night, said Corey Cook, a political science professor at St. Mary's College in Moraga. To some extent, this is the easy part. The hard part is governing. Breed still faces the trifecta of addiction, homelessness, and mental illness that contribute to complaints about street conditions, complicated issues with expensive solutions that local officials argue should also come from outside the city, including changes to state law and federal aid. Similar to Jenkins' recalled predecessor Chesa Boudin, Breed and the district attorney have no magic wand to fix crime, but will likely be held responsible for rates despite some forces outside their control, including judges and the economy. Breed must also confront a struggling downtown and mass tech layoffs that pose a long-term threat to the city's budget, meaning spending cuts could be on the horizon, unquote. I don't believe these issues are endemic to San Francisco. Los Angeles is facing a similar situation. New York elected a tough-on-crime mayor in Eric Adams. I've said before, I feel like we're headed into a 90s tough-on-crime moment. This one won't be defined by gangs and the violence that surrounded an influx of cheap cocaine. The boogeyman is poverty and its visceral effects on the demons. It's not drive-bys and crying mothers of slain children in the evening news. This time, it's property crime and people living in an RV in a residential street. What say y'all, the viewing public? What say the Thursday news crew? Let's bring them in, starting with my homie, my dog, my co-host. He is the man of the Mau Mau Hour. He is the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. Powerful intro there, my brother. Some heavy words.
Thank you. I'm working on these intros. Also coming all the way live from a secret bunker somewhere in central-ish, eastern-ish Texas. He says Austin, but it's really not Austin. Don't believe that. Is it San Marcos? Is it San Antonio? Wherever it is, it's not Austin. So don't look for this man in Austin. Please welcome co-host of Left Reckoning, columnist for Jacobin, and someone I feel very comfortable saying is my good friend. Please welcome David Griscom.
Thank you so much for that intro. I do want to be very clear. I don't have an official role in Jacobin Magazine. Don't want to get making a basket on my butt. They do publish my pieces from time to time.
Sometimes he writes it, Jack.
I couldn't imagine a better crew to be chatting about this with tonight. I mean, most of the midterm commentary has been pretty boring from folks. So I'm excited to hear what y'all have to say.
Well, someone that's going to help us with this commentary is also a very important part of this show. She is the faceless voice of reason. She is like a sister to Pascal and I. She is the M. Tucson.
Pascal is like I did not agree to that. Hello, everyone. Hello to the chat. Very lively chat.
Is it a lively chat today?
Yeah. We
I
got a
can't
regular.
They want to hear us drop bombs about the midterms.
I couldn't see because I have a new teleprompter app that was going way too fast, and I was like, I don't know how Amy Goodman does it.
Oh damn,
she is an OG.
She really is. You see how she ends her shows? Okay, Griscom, you have 5 seconds to finish and tell us what happened in the midterms. 4, 3. Thank you for watching Democracy.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Does she still say wear a mask?
Wish everybody happy birthday. Oh, before I even pivot to the questions, I do want to send 2 huge TIR family member birthdays. First and foremost, Jean Valjean's baby daughter just turned a year. I cannot believe it's been a year since V has been born. Oh my goodness. And also, my mom. My mom's birthday passed.
All right.
Shout out to my mom, who is now officially old enough to get the discounted food at Denny's.
It's a special birthday when you get that.
I think they start at 55 now, but she just turned 65. We are now officially 20 years apart.
She can take the bus for free or for cheap. Denny's to get a nice little discount. She's not even a vet. She could go tomorrow.
She is not a vet. She's a vet in these streets.
Hey.
Hey.
OG mom.
This is like the one episode she's watching. I'm going to get a text message like, I'm a vet in these streets, huh? Yeah, deal with it. Shut up.
Nice.
But speaking of me getting yelled at by my mother, David Griscom, can we finally stop acting like Beto has a chance to win anything? Is he really a victim of a generational distrust, or is Beto and Stacey Abrams just good at publicity and not really good at winning?
Man, I'll tell you what. It's been interesting to see the outside interest in the race here. During this election cycle, everyone knows now what the final results were, that Beto lost. But what's really fascinating is Beto broke fundraising records here for a Democrat. While Abbott still has a larger war chest, because that's Abbott's favorite thing in the world, is raising money. And but Beto raised something like $77
million,
which was pretty significant for this kind of race. But what's really fascinating is when you compare this race 2022 to 2018, where Lupe Valdez is somebody who y'all don't know, most people don't know. Beto barely outperformed her, by maybe something picked up 0.5 or 1% of the vote. So with all this money, with all this attention, there wasn't that much of a difference when it came down to the final vote total. And I think it's very fair to look at Beto as a candidate, but I think more importantly is looking towards the Democratic Party strategy, right? That there's a clear ceiling. Beto raised a lot of money, but a lot of the money was out of state donations, for example, which I think sort of shows, some of the major hurdles that any kind of statewide Democratic Party campaign has. I mean, for people who don't know, Texas used to be a very solidly Democratic state. And since 1994, Democrat has not won statewide office here, which is, extreme. And it means that the Republican Party has been able to cement power. I talk a lot about this, so people can maybe check out other videos for more in-depth version of this. It's a little tedious, but it's important that Abbott has fundamentally changed the position of the governor of Texas. He's used the kind of gray areas of the law. He's used the fact that the GOP is basically his party. He runs it here. To be able to increase the power of the governor of Texas, which compared to other states is a very limited position, constitutionally. They don't have a cabinet, for example. And the reason for that was because a bunch of Confederates didn't want a centralized government. But the fact is that the Texas system is not meant to have or intended to have a very, very strong central government system. And Abbott hasn't won that through, popular outreach or anything like that. He's used that because he's willing to basically push up against the edges of legality, and he has a GOP that is uninterested in basically challenging him on it. It's pretty wild though when you look at everything that happened here over the past year or 2 years, right? You have the horror of Uvalde, you have the abortion decision from the Supreme Court, and then the ban here.
Can I stop you for 1 second, David? I hate to interrupt you. You're on a roll, and I feel like I'm being a doucher, but I do want to ask you this from someone that actually lives in state.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much time you spent in your state's border towns. What is your take on the way the state feels about Uvalde?
I think that people are very upset, particularly about the police response to it. But there's two aspects to it, right? There's like the front. I mean, because it's unacceptable. The more that you read about what happened there with DPS, it's really unbelievable. I mean, and somebody just noted there, like Uvalde County, which it's also worth noting that that's not just the town; it's a larger rural county around there, and it's traditionally Republican. But yeah, Abbott won that county by about 20 points. And I think that like where there's a little bit of a disconnect is that there's a lot of frustration about DPS's failures, the police failures, all of that, the fact that there's been very little accountability for those folks. And then like, what do you do about it? Because I think like what a lot of liberals want to do is basically, push very strict gun laws, which is it's just not popular here. I'm sorry, folks. It's just like, that's not going to be a winning issue. And, I think that like there's a way to focus on the failures and the situation in Uvalde that wasn't basically, going to come take your guns kind of thing. And, the thing with Beto is that he vacillated between positions on this too. Obviously there's the famous line of him during the Democratic presidential debates where he says, yeah, I'm coming for your guns. And he would say something similar sometimes to certain audiences and then would sort of be more mild towards others, which I don't think helped him. But if I'm going to be honest, I don't think that the thing is that like the gun thing, I don't think is what lost it for him necessarily. But it also prevented him from basically being able to benefit from, not to be too cynical about it, but to benefit from like the failure there politically. What it ended up being is it's like there's two main, there's a few main issues. Abortion, I think, did nationally like motivate a lot of people to come out and vote. I think it also
I agree.
In a lot of people in major cities here coming out to vote. But a lot of people are very cynical about politics here. Only 15% of Texans support the abortion ban, right? So again, you think that'd be another thing that Beto would be able to benefit from. But a lot of people, they just don't feel like it's worth their time to vote for Democrat, even if they might disagree with the Republicans. And this is really the crux of the argument here, from my perspective, is that I think the Texas Democrats for a long time thought that, the Republicans will get so bad that eventually everyone's just going to show up for them. And like, you have to do more than that. You can't just be like, these other guys are monsters, vote for us. You have to give people a reason and something to believe and something to fight for, to show up for you. And they didn't really do that. I mean, this is a national thing, but I'm sure you all know this. Like, the main issues that motivated people in exit polls across the country were abortion and inflation. And I think it's an absolute disaster for the Democratic Party that whenever somebody said they were voting on the economy or on inflation, that's coded Republican, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think there was enough of an economic message, with the Beto campaign. Like, they say things and they put them out in their little press releases and maybe say things to certain crowds, but that wasn't what it was. It was Abbott's failing the state. Abbott failed during the grid. Abbott failed during Uvalde. Abbott's pushing forward laws that we don't like. And again, it's like, I agree. Like, I think Abbott's a bad guy. I think the Republicans are bad. But when you look at a state that has very low voter turnout, when you look at a state where a lot of people are very disillusioned with politics, both Republican and Democrat, the whole strategy was the line in Texas for a long time is Texas is not a red state. It's a non-voting state. And I think that's very fair to say in the sense that like people don't vote here. But the implied second aspect of that argument is that sooner or later, everyone's just going to show up and vote for the Democrats. And they haven't really figured out a strategy to do that. County level Democratic Party in Texas is very weak. State level is a joke. There's not a lot of presence to flip it. And like the Democratic Party is continuing to get stronger and stronger in the cities. But Texas is a big ass state. and there's not enough representation, infrastructure on the county level. So it just like, I didn't expect Beto to win. I was very pessimistic about it. Like last week, I did, a stream sort of talking about it. So I wasn't necessarily shocked that he lost. But when you think about it, with all the things that you would think would maybe open up some opportunity, some pickups, some kind of interesting narratives, maybe in the governor's race because of all the dysfunction here, to find out that with all the money, with all of the attention, with all the momentum on their side, that they barely outperformed a governor candidate who most people don't even know their name. So it's difficult. I will say that, like, there were exciting things. We're sending Greg Casar to Congress, who is a former DSA member. There's a whole backstory. Basically, he took a very moderate position on Israel, which I totally agree is unacceptable. But just knowing like where his politics are, this somebody who's very pro worker, very committed to a lot of these other things. That's a positive note. Marijuana decriminalization passed in 5 cities across the state, which is huge.
That passed in a lot of places. I was actually reading the New York Times, following the election, and it looks like marijuana legalization is passing, because I think people have seen the writing on the wall that it's just a windfall of cash for municipalities. I did want to ask you, kind of following up on that Uvalde question, how does a state that is so married to the idea of gun-toting violence and law and order reckon with the fact that law and order failed so miserably?
I mean, I don't think that what happened I mean, there's a couple things here. It's like there are 2 issues. It's like there's the gun question, and then there's the question of like the policing, right? Because this isn't an illegal firearm that was purchased. I mean, this is somebody who followed the laws that were on the books. When it comes to gun laws in Texas, it's like, again, open carry, which we have here, right? Which, by the way, like some of the first, like, if this is going back to traditional Texas values kind of thing. It's like, no, man, like the first laws that were passed in Texas were like restricting guns and knives in public places, because it was like the Wild West and they didn't want people carrying around
There's
guns.
still signs on like bars, like, please leave your gun in the car.
Totally. Yeah. And, the thing that's fascinating about the gun stuff here is that, the police departments really have lobbied against, the open carry in particular, because it makes their job harder. I think that at the end of the day, I think that people not wanting Beto to come into office and basically take a very hard gun stance prevented some people who they might have been able to win from showing up for him. I think most people who voted for Abbott voted on inflation. If they're like gettable, right? I'm talking about people who aren't just like dyed in the wool Republicans. They voted for him on inflation and on immigration. And, on immigration too, it's just like, I think what Abbott is doing is absolutely disgusting. I want a much more humane policy when it comes to immigration. But I think a lot, like it was vague from the Democrats about what they wanted to do about people coming over the border, right? Even if the argument is that it's not a threat, right? And we should go back to a more traditional Texan border, which for a long time, the border was very porous, which meant that people came over when there was work and they left when there wasn't work, right? Now it's a hard border, so you come over and you're not leaving because it's just too arduous and difficult, right? And I bring that up just to say that, like, that when I say that, like, I think that they failed on their immigration messaging, I'm not saying that we need to like mimic the right and be like, we're going to be hardliners on the border. But I think there was a kind of like, we're just not really going to get into that kind of thing, which I don't think is, that's just not a winning argument. So, it's tough because, I live here. This is where my family is, all the people I love, and it's scary. I mean, the abortion thing is horrific. The increasing violence here is very worrying. And while I'm not a Democrat, I don't want to continue living under Greg Abbott rule, because he's only getting more and more hardline as he continues to win these, effectively like unopposed governor races. So it's just like, you see a strategy from the Democratic Party here. They've failed They've been losers for literally like what I was 2 years old the last time a Democrat won any kind of state office. So my entire life has been this GOP dominance. And it's just really frustrating to see that there's been no real reckoning, no real lessons learned to try to build something because, there's been a lot of excuses. The non-voter thing, there's no real strategy for non-voters other than we think Republicans are bad. And then the other one is the demographics is destiny thing, where they thought that as the state's demographics change with new people moving here, which I've always thought was a silly argument because a lot of people who move here from California and New York City, they move here because they want to be under Republican rule. So the idea that all of these people are just going to be liberal voters, I think is wrong.
Oh, it's totally wrong because a lot of people don't even change their address. I think people don't understand that about transient cities like Austin, for example, that's becoming a lot more transient with the influx of a tech corridor. Even in canvassing for Shahid in San Francisco, which is an extremely transient city when it comes to tech, there were so many people you talk to, they're like, I'm registered where I'm from. Texas deals with the same thing. People love it, the cheap rent, and then they ruin a bunch of cool spots and then they go back to California because it's too hot there.
And but the other thing too is it's just like the demographics thing, like not just talking about new population, but like there's been this argument that Texas is now majority Latino. So white people are not the largest ethnic group in Texas, right? And there's been this kind of idea that's like, oh, once the Latino population continues to grow here, they're going to vote Democrat. And like, if you look at the numbers, Latinos do support Democrats at a much higher rate than Republicans. But when you got the numbers that the Republicans already have, it doesn't take much pickup to sort of cement that, for the next generation. And the Republicans, while the Democrats are sort of, floundering around trying to win more suburban votes, right? Which that's basically Beto and Biden's strategy here. There's a ceiling to that. They're not loyal. And also I would just argue, like, even in the best case scenario that you win for people with our politics, you don't want the suburban voters to be the base of a Democratic Party because, these aren't people who really want high wages for people, housing regulation, things like that. But also, like, the Republicans have been much more adept at focusing on South Texas. And, like, I think it's important not to give people the wrong idea that, like, the Republicans are dominating there and they're going to win there for generations or everything. But, like, they're making races competitive in places that they shouldn't be. And there was 3 big congressional races in South Texas that the Republicans were talking big on that they were going to flip. They ended up the 3 big ones. The Democrats won 2 of them and the Republicans won 1 of them. And that was the district, in fairness, so it's very gerrymandered. But again, like, you got to be just picking up seats. You can't be playing defensive. And the thing that's really frustrating is it's Texas 15. Monica de la Cruz won that election against one of the more, like, kind of not Democratic socialist progressive, but progressive in the sense like pro-abortion, not a conservative Democrat kind of character. And like the DCC, the National Democratic Party, refused to invest in that race, while the Republican on the national level were bumping it. It was just like, come on, man. It's like, why? Because they get to say, oh, well, you guys shouldn't be putting up these lefty progressive folks, in these races. We need more Henry Cuellar's. And folks like that to win. I mean, that's, it's a self-serving kind of retreat from the Democratic Party. And I think it's not good to be able to give them the narrative that, the Republican Party represents, working class, Hispanic voters here. So, I mean, a real disaster basically is what the story is here, which has made me feel very alienated when a lot of people have been saying like, oh, well, last night wasn't as bad as we expected. I don't have it up to share with y'all, but Myra Flores was one of these Republican candidates who the Democratic Party did a kind of Pied Piper thing with, because there was a special election in that district. They let her win it with the kind of hope that, like, oh, she's going to show up and everyone knows she's crazy. And, in their defense, she did end up losing it. But I think it's a very dangerous game to play when you remember what the Democratic Party did with Trump, to start thinking that you can just bring right wingers and they won't cause trouble. Elon Musk supported her very passionately during the race. And just to show you like the state of the disaster of the Texas Democratic Party, Myra Flores tweeted out like one of the funniest tweets in response to her defeat, which was, "There's no red wave. And if you didn't vote, you have no right to complain. People didn't show up," basically like blaming the voters, which is very funny. I was giggling at that. And then the Texas State Democratic Party put that up as their banner image on their Twitter account. We're just like, this is not the time for y'all to be celebrating when you got smacked all up and down the state and you didn't lose a seat that you should never be competitive in the first place for Republicans. Like that's the mentality here. So it's not looking too good for them. But I will say, like, trying to be optimistic, like the progressives are continuing to grow in strength, and the real challenge is going to be dealing with the association with the Democratic Party, which I think is a big negative, not just with Republicans, but with people who voted for Obama and are really disillusioned about politics. So there's momentum, and then there's like big challenges ahead of people who want to do different kind of politics than status quo Texas State Democratic Party politics here.
Pascal, what say you about that phenomenon?
I want to ask you a couple of questions there. Do you think there's still a motivating force within the corporate Democratic Party faction to try to neutralize the progressives to their left on a national political level?
I mean, I think so. I think that they're more worried about them than Republicans in a lot of places, right? I mean, like if you look at last night nationally, right? The squad, right? If we want to use like a loose, term for that, like they picked up 4 more folks that are going to join that block in Greg Casar, in Summerlee, in Pennsylvania, in Illinois, in Florida as well, right? And I think that they do see the progressive movement as a threat. They were blaming the progressives for their messaging I bring that up just because it's like, you can talk about how many Republicans are trying to like put that idea on other Democratic Party candidates. But when it came down to people who were on the ballot, who were running progressive elections, like they did really well last night. And I think the Democratic Party doesn't really want them to have the momentum that they do have.
Right. What's interesting to me about the election on Tuesday night was that not only did the Democratic Party not want them to be the face of the party, but if you look at the demographics of the actual voter turnout, it was a youth-driven election, which illustrates why there's going to be a correlation between the voter turnout and the success that progressives had in many of the more liberal progressive districts. So if the allegation is that all of this lefty messaging, defund the police and all this other stuff, is costing Democrats at the ballot box and at the election booth, how is that the case when youth voter turnout is up? And basically it's the youth voter turnout that helped drive the fact that the Democrats didn't get shellacked when we were expecting massive red wave.
I mean, we all know this, but like it's really ridiculous. Like, I'm not somebody who gets really worked up about trying to demand socials show up and vote for the Democratic Party, but like the accusation that across the board that movement is like not showing up for them, they're refusing to vote, etc., has just been shown to be false, right? And you can make a radical left critique, maybe that's a bad thing, but like the argument that the Democratic Party makes, that it's like all these progressives and Democratic socialist people are sabotaging the party because they want purity. I think you're very right. It's like the youth vote is like saving their ass right now. Because without that, I mean, I don't think we'd be having the same kind of conversations about the midterms on the national level without the youth vote. And like, I think that like where it really matters, like Greg Casar, who won here, had a very, very like brutal primary, right? And then like it's one of those districts that the Republicans give to the Democrats in Texas as like a gimme, right? It's super gerrymandered. I think he won like 78% of the vote or something like that, right? So where this argument starts to become really important, I think, for us as we're like trying to grow, is that like in those safe districts especially, it's like there is no reason then to put up conservative moderate Democrats. If they are safe blue districts or whatever, I think that we should be running, leftists in most places, frankly. I don't think we should be cowards about our politics because I think a lot of the reason that I support this stuff is I think it can flip some of those districts, but especially in ones that are, deemed safe. I think the Democratic Party is worried that those kind of safe districts that they hold, we'll see more and more progressive candidates coming in and winning those elections and pushing back on the people who have run the Democratic Party for most of our lives.
Yeah, that's a very important point. No, and I think that it's really going to be a battle that's going to be worth seeing how it plays out. But it's again, the question also becomes how do we keep that flame of left politics within the Democratic Party, which is a strategy that many people have been questionable about. Alive, we don't have a mainstream, large-scale bellwether like a Bernie Sanders that gets people energized about participating in the party. So it becomes a question that we have to ask in terms of how do we maintain this kind of energy base and stop it from just petering out when we don't have someone driving the policy agenda at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And we also don't have a grassroots movement at the bottom either.
No.
And I'm somebody who, I'll admit, I was a little hesitant about supporting Bernie because I was just, when Bernie was running the first time, I was involved in politics a little bit, but it was like being a socialist was like a kind of personal, private, little secret that I held for myself and my friends, right? It wasn't political in the sense of like active, right? I showed up to protest and I did things, but there wasn't a movement, right? I was at Occupy anyway. I say all that to say that, I think Bernie's done a tremendous amount to mobilize and motivate this movement. But, if I am to make, a criticism, it's just Lord, it would have been so helpful if after 2016 or 2020, Bernie Sanders said, if you support this, join up an organization like the DSA instead of launching our revolution, which is just, another PAC at the end of the day. And I think that we really are in a crisis moment with that. You're seeing the left splinter off into a bunch of different groups and, some people become very pessimistic about politics. I think that the real fight right now is trying to find some kind of structure, some kind of organization, some kind of grassroots movement that can sustain it for the next 5 to 10 years. Because I think there is a real threat of just permanent fracturing. Some people into the more radical revolutionary left, some people into the more Warren style progressive side of politics. That I think would be really damaging when so many people have come together.
We have a super chat here that I'd love for you to address really quickly. Infinite Content says, here is the dilemma the DNC has. They want the vote, but they don't want to share power with the. That's not going to work.
Can you say that again? Because you were clipping. Can you say it again?
Okay. Here's the dilemma.
What's going on over there?
Nothing.
There's so much moving.
Okay.
It's supposed to be stationary.
I'm trying to make sure the microphone is all clear.
Are you chasing children or something? What's going on?
I'm not your children.
You sound like it. Just sit your ass. It sounds like you're making one of them black mom face. Actually, that's a mom face. I've seen everybody make.
Here is the dilemma the DNC has. They want the youth vote. They don't want to share power with the youth. That's not going to work.
The Democratic Party is a party about democracy management, right? If you want to make the argument about the Republicans that they want to suppress the vote, the Democratic Party wants to manage voters. I think there's no better examples than that than New York State. It's very hard to vote there. It's in a lot of places the Democratic primary is where you vote, and they make it very damn hard to do that. So yeah, they want to at the end of the day for some people to show up for them, but yeah, there's no real interest. I mean, I can't speak with real experience, in places like New York, what it's like to go to meetings there. I don't go to Democratic Party meetings here, but from what I've heard from friends, it's absolute nightmare to try to get involved even in the Texas State Party because they don't like newcomers at all, right? Because they have their comfy positions in their little zones, even if they're just losers. They don't want, even if it might be beneficial to them. But yeah. Waz is here.
Yeah. Shout out to Big Waz.
The biggest.
I do want
loss.
to. I want to address this, and it's not an issue with Woz. We actually had a very fun Saturday show where we discussed a popular topic. I don't want to say, but YouTube is not letting us monetize that show.
Sorry.
It said after a manual review, and all I was thinking was like, what did we say in that show that was so bad that they were like, no, it's too real. You guys exposed the truth.
Maybe they were Hebrew Israelites at YouTube.
So that's what it is. And this is I'm saying it right now. Listen to me now. There's Black Israelites in YouTube, and they are against this revolution. Support This Is Revolution by being a subscriber and stop the reign of the fascist Black Hebrew Israelites that are stopping shows like this from being able to make 75 cents.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, what's going on in Florida with DeSantis? Are the Haitians showing up for him?
I mean, this is the question. Let me read this.
Yeah, read it. Read it.
Let me read this real quick. This is from Wani Lumbre. Pascal, please, for the love of God, tell those Haitians in Dade County to stop with the DeSantis love. Please.
I don't think so much it's the DeSantis love from the Haitian community, because we had Haitians who ran for municipal elections in Dade County. For example, Marlene Bastien, who actually won. So Miami-Dade County is a pretty heavily Haitian Democratic constituency. I think that you're talking about Haitians maybe in other parties, in other parts of like Palm Beach County, which DeSantis won as well, or further to the north in Broward. But Miami-Dade County, the Haitians pretty much are pretty dedicated to the Democratic Party. Not that I'm saying I'm a Democrat, but that seems to be the case. So I wouldn't necessarily blame them for the DeSantis win. I guess it's my turn to pivot to my area. I mean, I'm going to have to echo with what David had to say here in terms of the rather bleak turnout for Florida. You all saw what happened in Florida. Florida goes red hard for Ron DeSantis and Val Demings, who spent millions of dollars in that election to beat Marco Rubio. She got crushed in minutes. The election results came out, and she went nowhere. And what's more important to me is that what is one piece of good news that comes out of Florida, and I think we should celebrate, no easy victories, is that we have a 25-year-old Florida Democrat secures Generation Z's first House seat. Maxwell Alejandro Frost focused on issues important to many young voters: gun violence, climate change, abortion rights, and Medicare for all. Maxwell Alejandro Frost, a 25-year-old Democrat, won his election on Tuesday in Florida's 10th district over Calvin Wimbush, a Republican, according to the Associated Press. Mr. Frost will represent the Orlando area seat being vacated by Representative Val Demings. So what's interesting is that Val Demings, because she was running for Senate, had to evacuate her seat, but she had a progressive to her left, hopefully a DSA member, I think he is, if I'm not mistaken, take her position in the House. So that's a bit of a shot to the Congressional Black Caucus, and it's also one win for the progressive as well. But I think overall, the story that comes out of the state of Florida is that Ron DeSantis, who beats Charlie Crist by at least 15 points, is now secured his position as a major contender for the presidential election in 2024, because he has, the wind at his sails. He's a big time popular. He's the most popular governor in the United States right now. Very right wing, very reactionary. His closing speech stated that he was saying that, quote unquote, Florida is the state that woke comes to die.
Damn.
Yeah. This
Damn.
is what he told. Yeah.
Where woke comes to die?
Yes.
Huh. Interesting.
Can I ask y'all about on DeSantis? Have y'all experienced the DeSantis bros yet?
Where the fuck did you experience that?
So I mean, on like online thing, like I don't like this is anecdotal, so I don't know what this says about maybe his presidential ambitions, but man, anytime Matt and I have done anything mentioning Ron DeSantis on YouTube, it's just comments, bot comments of people just being like really psycho pro DeSantis, which is like I think that it's outstated like the role of like online right wing freaks, boosting Trump in 2016. But it has been interesting to see all these folks giving themselves a new great white hope in Ron DeSanctimonious over the past couple months.
Waz says they banned cocoa butter in Florida, so he ain't never going. Just ashy niggas running around Florida. Ashy ass Haitians. Ashy ass Haitians and Dominicans. For the love of God, why? Someone sent a super chat twice, and no one on the screen can answer that. And I think I'm probably the only one qualified to even try to answer that. Is that none of us have seen Black Panther 2. Is it Welcome to Wakanda or Wakanda Forever, or Now the Hoes is Fighting, whatever the hell they call in part 2. But none of us.
That's our buddy down in Australia. Come on, man. The superhero chat is just not going to happen on these programs. I know you keep trying to make it happen, but it's not what we do.
I will be honest and say this. I've seen Black Panther multiple times. I do watch superhero movies because I am a nerd and 45, and this is my era. And seeing the cartoons that I grew up on in movie form, makes me very excited. But I haven't seen Black Panther 2. It's too much for me to take because I actually really did like Chadwick Boseman. Like, I don't want to cry.
Aww. Did you hear everybody's getting to stop again to go watch Black Panther 2? But they're all getting dressed up.
We should get dressed up.
They're
like
wearing
NWA.
white. They're wearing white. Everyone is wearing white.
We should all go in New York when we go to New York. We should all go, but as NWA, but only me, you, and Pascal, not Matt and David, because that's not good.
Jesus, this is why the left loses.
You just lost the left.
Create all these divisions. Let me do it. Let me in.
Can you imagine? If we? And Pascal was dressed like Biggie.
Oh God!
That's that. Look, if you guys want to go see Black Panther 2, do that shit and dress. Well, now that I said that, all these white people are gonna dress like Easy.
He said I could.
The black guy said I could. I do want to say this real quick, and then no, I won't say. I'll save it for the champagne room.
I will just say funny. Paul Prescott's in the chat too.
Motherfucking Paul!
Cheers to our friend there.
I wanted to
Hi, Paul.
Some general conversations about the election, not just about Florida overall. But what's up with Pennsylvania? I'd love to hear what Paul Prescott had to say.
Fetterman, man.
Fetterman coming through in the clutch
with a hoodie. With a fucking hoodie and losing a debate.
I mean, I think that, you have to ask yourself the question that if he hadn't gone through those struggles, I mean, we might have even seen like huge margins probably in his favor. I mean, I think Fetterman is excellent. I think it's worth noting, like, he's not necessarily a Democratic socialist or anything like that, but boy, like, that's somebody who is like a very organic kind of left-wing pro-worker candidate that I want to see a lot more of. Like, people sometimes get worked up about his like fracking answers where he says like he's not wanting to ban fracking outright. But if you listen to what he says there, he says we have to come up with a solution for all the people who work in those industries. And it's like, boy, I would much rather have somebody who's like thinking about what a green transition looks like for working people. Don't get me wrong, like, we got to get rid of fracking. etc. But like, you know, there are some people on the left and like in the green movement who will just say to, you know, people who work in the fossil fuel industry, 2 middle fingers, learn to code. And I think that's a disastrous strategy for winning, and also humanitarian level. It's like that's horrible kind of strategy too. So it's like I like where Fetterman's head's at, even in things where like I disagree with him like that. He's a big simp for Israel though, which is a little bit of a bummer. But we could give him a little bit of a pass for now. Who knows? Maybe he'll
you just
maybe
lost the
make
left.
a tactical decision.
Telling people to go learn to code, that's very passe, you know. Very, you know, early 2000s, 2010s.
So what do you tell people to do?
We want to support the Green Deal.
Oh, but like, that's what you say when you're like, oh, you're gonna lose all these jobs in this industry. What's the answer? They don't say learn how to code. What do they say? I don't know what they say.
Green New Deal.
You know what I hear people say now? You know what the hot thing is that I've seen? Because I actually do get all this right-wing shit from all the goddamn video intros I made, is go to work. There's all these jobs. There's too many jobs. Yeah. There's more jobs than people. Just go to work. And
so we all know how great.
So from people that I know, since I actually do talk to people not on the internet, one of the things that I've found is that when you're looking for a job, they want full availability. So even if it's a part-time job, they're like, so even if, let's say you do something on the weekends, like you have a job, you have a kid, whatever the fuck it is, you have something that you do on the weekends, but you need some extra money to supplement that. A lot of places like, we need all that availability. We need those Saturdays free. You're like, well, I work somewhere Saturday. Well, we can't hire you. It's like, bitch, it's Walmart. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Well, even if you have hours, you're on call. They want you to be as close to on call as possible.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that's a big part of the Starbucks unionization effort too, is that like those are supposed to be jobs that respected like your college curriculum or something like that. You know, that's how they pitch it to folks. And now they're just like, no, we're going to schedule it all the way through. But we'll just say really quick, I mean, like the answer to, you know, people working those industries, just for anyone listening who hasn't heard my pitch on it, it's like, it is a Green New Deal and specifically just transition. I mean, like, you know, I think a lot of people for a long time have said like climate change is a problem. We have to do something, but we haven't spent any time thinking about what it is that we're actually going to do. People are talking about changing the way that like the electricity comes to your household, you cook your food, you keep the lights on. Like this is important shit. And I'm sorry, I would much rather have people who have been spending their lives producing electricity on a professional level, running and not just like, oh, we're going to give people some stipends for a short period of time, but saying y'all have expertise, right? And we want to utilize that. So you want that potentially in solar. I think an even better transition system is something like nuclear power, which, you know, doesn't have the same problems with intermittency, and also is something where a lot of those skills that people have in extractive industries, like there are similar jobs that it's a quick training program to get people into doing that work. So like the point is not just to say that like, you know, fuck you, figure shit out. It's actually like, no, you know, we need people like you who have been doing this critical work to make sure that the system functions, and we can do it. I don't know, like I know this is like my hobby horse, y'all, so I won't go on too long, but like it pisses me off that like, you know, people make this kind of false equivalence between like working people's dignity and like ability to feed their families and like a transition off of fossil fuels, right? When you don't have to make that choice. Like there is a program that will work to decarbonize our economy that also produces good results for working people. And, you know, people have gotten really pessimistic and nasty, you know, who basically want people's standards of living to decline. I mean, that's like the degrowth movement. And it's very frustrating because it's like, it's a false choice that is a really nasty thing. It's a false choice in the sense that like, we don't have to do that. I also don't think that the kind of nasty version is even politically viable. And we also have this one that's very, very attractive, which is like, let's give people good wages. Let's give people the ability to continue doing critical work in our society. And, you know, I think that a lot of people on the green movement and in the green left in particular have been really terrible on that. And I've been encouraged to see folks shifting on it, but
isn't there some kind of complications when we say this, because there's different sides to this green movement, and we definitely saw some of those sides in a documentary that was, I think, produced by Michael Moore, but I don't know. how much he had to do with it. Planet of the Humans, which really shits on the environmental movement as a whole, especially Bill McKibben. And I think we're both friends with Joshua Kahn Russell. And when I was in the Bay Area, I knew Josh. We'd hang and stuff. And he had some, opinions of that film as well. He felt it didn't tell the whole story. Nuclear energy. I just watched an interesting documentary about a movie called Stalker. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's an old Russian film from the 70s. That's about a nuclear power plant, kind of a dystopian future. But, there's definitely some issues with the fallout of nuclear power, right? Like those things have to be built right. If not, we get 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl.
It's still, I mean, when it comes down to it, though, it's still the safest way to produce energy. Like it's not even close when you look at like deaths per kilowatt produced. It's just like there is not a power system that doesn't come with certain amounts of risks, and nuclear is on the very, very low side. I think one of the things that's tough about it is that it's complicated, it's scary. We don't think about these kind of systems, and I think there's very fair criticism to make that the nuclear movement, for example, hasn't been able to present, the science and the facts to people. So I get that there's a lot of worries about it. I was very anti-nuclear power for a long time until I started learning about what those systems look like. But the fact of the matter is that, if we don't take this question seriously about what a transition is going to look like, we could get ourselves into, I mean, like, look, for example, what's happening in Europe, right? You've seen all of these, environmentalist movements like shut down nuclear plants. And, in the past 5 years, the amount of carbon that has been released in Europe because of the shutdown of all these nuclear plants in Germany in particular is equivalent to what is produced in half of Africa, the continent of Africa, right? That's just now being, carbon that is being released into the atmosphere because people are running away from nuclear power. I think that, like, when you look at modern societies that have decarbonized the most, it was those societies that started utilizing more nuclear power in the 70s and 80s, right? Like, if you're worried about the environment, there's a technology here that is there. The reason that you don't see more nuclear, by the way, folks, is not because it's dangerous or scary. Like, you think capitalists give a shit about that? It's because it doesn't have the same kind of profit opportunity as other systems do, particularly because the upfront investment in nuclear is very high, right?
Very
so
high.
Private investors are worried about investing in that, and it's just like, well, that's fine. That's an even better argument for what we should be doing, which is having state investment running these systems, like we do, for example, with like the Tennessee Valley Authority.
But are we at a moment, though? And this is a question to you. And I know it's getting late, and you have things to do, and you need to move on. But in closing, I want to ask this question to everybody as well. Are we in a moment where the federal system can look to build that level of infrastructure? I mean, it seems too caught up in paying for foreign wars than it is for paying to seriously try to pay for that level of infrastructure. Because, look, David, I'm not trying to say you're wrong, because I don't know enough about nuclear power. I know very little, and I'm not trying to say you're wrong. I'm just posing my novice question.
I mean, I think the point is we have a fight in front of us, because we have, serious climate destruction on the horizon, right? And there are two paths in front of us when it comes. I mean, there's a few paths, but like the two very probable ones are, a real movement that actually decarbonizes our society, and that's going to need state investment to do it properly, or we do a kind of ad hoc neoliberal individualist one, which is the direction that we're going, right? And that is going to be a system that is going to have very serious crises of intermittency, right? Because solar and wind, when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, you do create these crises. And people talk about batteries, but the battery systems are not as functional as a lot of people believe them to be. So we do have this very real crisis where it's like, if we don't want to utilize fossil fuel, we're going to have to come up with something that has a very, very large capacity to be able to produce electricity. I think what we're seeing more likely than not, though, is Macron's stuff: wage war on working people, increase the cost on people for basic things like energy. And we should be very worried about that on our side. I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and say that what's in front of us is easy, but I think if we know what we need to do, this is the moment that we have to be fighting for, instead of just sort of saying, okay, well, we're just going to let capital decide the future of not just our lives, but like the future of the planet. Because there are people who they love, particularly Europeans, like they love to be able to say, we're going to do neoliberalism, but instead of calling it neoliberalism, we're going to call it environmentalism. And they're very ready to do that for folks. And I think people should be very cautious about what's coming with that.
Well, David, thank you for hanging out with us today. And I will second the comments in the chat that your hair is fabulous. Before we went on air, we were calling David second coming. That's very Jesus-esque.
I'm feeling it.
Can I just
Pascal
say,
Robert? Oh,
thank you. Can I just say, there are things that I disagree with you about on this, David. I am foremost expert in The Simpsons and nuclear power plant that Homer Simpson worked at. I will concede that the waste management is not what it used to be. You won't see too many 3 fish, but it is a concern. The waste is a concern.
The waste is the least of your concerns. I will just say, I know we're wrapping up, but I'm just going to tell you right now, I'll send you some stuff after. Like, the waste is stuff that takes a long time to degrade, stuff that has a long half-life, is like the least threatening thing. Like, we interact with radiation on a regular basis. If you drink a cup of milk in the morning, you get there's radiation in that. What's worrying is stuff that has a very fast half-life, things that degrade really quickly, because that means that you're going to get a stronger dose of radiation. There have been the people get very worried about the waste, but like, one, if you looked at all of the waste in the United States, for example, since we've had nuclear power, it would, if you were to put it in like this is not even what it looks like, but if you were to just sort of set it up, it would be a football field about 10 feet high, right? So like, if you think about the space, it's different from what a lot of people think. And really, like, that's not the stuff I'd be worried about. What you would be worried about is more things that are like directly in the core or anything like that. And I know that we're not jumping into the whole thing here, but I'm telling you, the waste management on the other side is like, again, like, I was very worried about this system for a long time, and then I started to learn more and more about it, and I was very, very surprised to find out that particularly waste, which is, I think, something that people cite a lot, is less of a threat than I think people think that it is. Potentially too, that all that stuff can be recycled and like reutilized, so you can use that waste again to produce energy. But anyway, sounds like this is a conversation we should do sometime in the near future. But
JB
/ fight.
If you've ever found your community was the site of a waste dump, what does he say? If you've ever found out your community was on a list for radioactive waste dump, you sober up real quick. Thank you so much, JB, for that super chat. That's huge. That will make up the loss that we got from Waz.
I mean, if you look at it, the issues with waste have not been what people think that they are. There are things to be worried about, but the the effect on communities about waste has not been what I think a lot of people think. Because look, these are scary systems. People don't understand what radiation does, but like, waste is something that you should be very comfortable having. It is not a big threat to you and your community. I understand people questions about politics and things like that. Like, do you want it? Should you have the ability to make those decisions? That's very fair. But scientifically, health wise, I'm telling you can sleep very easy.
Look, I saw what it did to share.
That's so could be worth a show. What do you think about that, Jason?
What do you say?
This could be worth a show.
I think it is worth a show, and I think go ahead.
It's It's definitely the conversation. It's probably worth a street fight. I'm just saying now, David with the good hair, we might be fighting. That might be a thing
Look,
that happens.
without now we have a movie for movie night now. We could all watch Silkwood.
There you have it.
Have you seen Silkwood, Pascal?
Years ago, man. I don't even remember it.
A teacher made me watch.
And y'all should also sorry, just really quick, because I
Mm-hmm.
saw Paul said this. If you want to have somebody who's much more learned about this stuff than me, y'all should have Lee Phillips on the program to talk about.
Oh, man.
Lee Phillips has been showing up in my Facebook people I should know, and that made me feel like I was.
He's a good dude. He can definitely break down a lot of the stuff better than me. Not that I wouldn't be happy to do it, but he's definitely the guy to talk to.
Well, maybe I should friend Lee Phillips on Facebook since he keeps showing up in people I should know.
Oh, yeah.
You should.
Him on the show.
He's a good dude.
That's how I know I'm a success in this industry. When people that you see on, like when Aaron Mate showed up in people I should know, I was like, haha.
Oh, I thought Facebook was trying to get me beef when I saw him. I was like, don't suggest this and do that. I was just trying to rep my set. But you and Lee Phillips can talk about plaid shirts together. It'll be great. He has an
Lee Phillips likes the plaid.
He sure does.
He does.
He's Canadian.
No shit.
He
From
is
real
Canadian.
Canada or Vancouver?
I think it's
No,
from
I
Canada.
think he's real Canada.
Yeah.
Where they sound like kids from Degrassi High.
I don't know.
Well, on that note, let's not fuck with Lee Phillips where he won't take my friend request. I saw you, making fun of me, What's it on the boot?
Nice.
YouTube will fucking jump me. That's all I need. Bunch of maple syrup eating motherfuckers trying to mess with me. Well, whoever rated the show on Twitch, unfortunately, we can't see the Twitch raids on the program that we use. Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching. If you haven't done it already, patreon.com/Bitterlake presents. We're going to go in the champagne room where we'll be taking your calls. We want to hear what you have to say about election night. David Griscom, thank you so much for blessing us with your wonderfulness and your hair. Please say hello to your fiance for me.
I sure will. Thanks so much, y'all. I'm looking forward to doing this again soon and hanging out maybe sometime in person in the future.
All right.
Yes, I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll see. Something might be cooking, y'all.
Ranch water. Ranch.
But I might need to go get what I've been cooking. So I will talk to y'all later.
Yeah, and the whole gang's going to be there too when we do that thing that we can't talk about.
Hell yeah. I'm stoked for that.
All right. So thank you, David, Pascal, MT. I will see you and everyone else on the other side in the champagne room. And we did Paul, wait a minute. Paul, did you say bring Drake in to talk about nuclear? Is that your light skin? Paul Prescott has a light skinned alliance. I just want you guys to know that Paul is part of the light skinned alliance.
Transnational light
skinned alliance. Paul Prescott is the head. It's Paul, Drake, and Sean King. And sometimes Derek Varn. Light skinned alliance. All right, we are out. I think we are. We should be. We should be out.